Welcome back, guys. I've been up to a few things while I was away, so this deserves explanation. First, I'll give you a listen of what this sounds like, not Adam's piece, but what I did, and comment on what happened. Sorry, it has to stop there. I know more of the song is exciting than this part, but that's what the tutorial covers. Anyway, so I walked you through what I did with the piano, and yeah, I basically took all the main instruments my ear heard, piano, percussion, which ended up being compressed, and I'll explain that later, the bass, synth, and then the strings. But that's the gist of things, and I gave each one its own track, and they're not being run through any effects whatsoever. It's a straight, naked instrument. So for the percussion, it's a very, very basic patch, which is nice. I ended up using the Indie Live kit. I don't know if you can figure out what sounds better. But it's a basic thing with a kick, a snare, and a hi-hat, which is nice. And that sounds like this alone. And it runs all the way through until here. And I figured out where it looped and dragged it out. So nothing fancy there. The bass synth was interesting. I have all the notes here. And I needed something to work with. And I figured out through practice and through listening and actually originally looking up on Wikipedia when I was very first starting out in this, I figured out what each wave sounds like, each popular wave used in synthesis. And I figured out this is a sawtooth wave. That's all it is. That's all that's going on in this track up here with Adam singing. And that's it. It's just some funky modulation. We'll get into that later. I'm just using a basic sawtooth wave, very, very little filtration, if at all, and nothing fancy on the amp. And it sounds terrible. It sounds like this. But I'll get into sprucing that up later. So there's that. This second part I figured out looped from measure 11 on, which was nice. It's the same. And the only thing that changed between this part and the beginning part, as you can see, just the ending notes. So that was fun. And then the strings. I found a patch that worked well on my sampler for that. And the low octave goes until measure 11, and then they add the top two notes up, or he adds the top two notes up here. So that's basically what's going on here. And consequently, that's all that's going on for this first part of the tutorial series. Stay tuned for part 2, which will be next week. I'll go into synth sound design and really get this bass synth sounding good. And one more note before I leave, actually. The main trick with this is to get your ear to hone in on a certain instrument, a certain sound, a certain setting, and it can get really deep with the compression, because not only can you have to pick out one kit, you have to pick out the notes in the kit. So I wrote these out and figured out, for example, I wrote this in layers. I listened to the track once and I figured out where the kick hit, and I put all the kick drum parts in. And then I listened again and added the snare, and then I listened again and added the hi-hat. And I would go and do this over and over again for however long it took to figure out where all the percussion hits were. But that's the main thought process there. There's no wizardry, there's no fandangled, I'm going to push one button and it'll analyze this song and figure out the instruments, and no. That's not what happens. It's just plain simple listening. And if you can learn to do that and you have the time and the patience to do that, the rewards you reap will be very, very well deserved. So that's basically what's going on here. Like I said, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching and tolerating my blathering on. Like I said, part 2 will be synth sound design. Will be next week, so stay tuned for that. If you're interested in more of this kind of stuff, I make music similar to Owl City, although I don't want to be put in a box next to him, because I want to find my own sound. But you can see and hear more on the link on screen. I go under The Fledgling, I might also have a page on Facebook, which will also be joining the link on screen here. And take a listen, comment, criticize, and give me feedback, because I'm always looking for ways to improve how I sound, and I want to sound how other people like. So that's it. So thank you again, and I will see you next week.